Art World. I'm Barbara Lee Diamondstein, and tonight our guest is one of America's most respected realist painters, whose inspiration has been the streets of New York for over 60 years. Some call him the Isaac Bashevis Singer of the painting world because of his honest vision and ability to capture the beauty of human nature. Saw you react to that. A very warm welcome to you, Raphael Soyer.
Thank you very much.
I see a quizzical response to that introduction.
Yes, I have a quizzical response, yes.
Yes.
This is the first time that I was called the Isaac Bashevis Singer of painting. And I really don't think there is any similarity or any relationship at all. I always was a non-parochial painter, and I painted only what I saw in my neighborhood in New York City, which I call my country rather than my city. But I must stress again that this is the very first time that I was called the Isaac Bashevis Singer in painting.
Actually, several critics have referred to you that way.
Did they
in
know?
print. Yes.
Now that I know, probably I don't read too much of the criticism. I don't have a great opinion of the critical writing in this country, and I may have neglected to read this particular thing.
How important is the work of a critic to an artist?
Well, in my life, the critics were not terribly important, as far as I'm concerned, as far as my work was concerned. No, they were not very. I never paid attention to critics, and I always worked the way I wanted to, the way I chose to, for better or for worse. And if I had to listen to critics, I don't know what would have happened to my work.
Well, a great deal has happened to your work, and you tell us about it in considerable detail in your own memoirs and in numerous books that have been written about you. Why don't we begin at some of the beginning and refer to your memoirs, where you tell us of your early life in Russia, a childhood of delight in art and in literature, but fraught with frustrations. At a very early age, your family was expelled from Russia, and you emigrated to the United States when I believe you were 13.
12.
12? What were the circumstances of the departure?
Well, I would like to call at this moment attention to my book called The Diary of an Artist, where all this is described in great detail. At this moment, I really can't clearly recall, just exactly what happened. I know that my father was very much involved with the student population of the city we came from, Borisovlevsk. That was the name of the city. And he somehow was involved with some of the progressive students. And in the Tsarist Russia, that was an offense. And also because we were Jewish people, and Jewish people didn't have much citizenship at that time in Tsarist Russia. They were, my parents were told to leave the country. It was something what they call право жительства in Russian. That means the right to live, that Jewish people in that Russian town had, the Russian town where we came from. There was a very small population of Jewish people there, and they were very Russianized, but they all had to have something called the right to live. And they took away from my father this document, the right to live, and he had to leave Russia. And we came to this country, like many, many people in those days who emigrated or immigrated into this country.
Was it not rather unusual for you and members of your family to be so involved, even at such an early age, with art?
Yes. Yes, I think it was, but as I said before, my father was the intellectual of that town, and he was very much interested in literature and in art, in Russian literature, in Hebrew literature, and he loved art, and he encouraged us. You know, all children draw when they're all people draw when they're children, and he encouraged us to draw, and we pursued this, and he himself drew a little bit, and that's how we became involved in art at a very early age.
And how did you first
three brothers, I and my two brothers.
How did you first become involved with drawing from life?
Yes, that's a very interesting story too. That's also in my book. I mean,
Well, perhaps you would tell us, for those of us who do not yet have your book.
Well, yes, but maybe don't get it now and read it, because there it's in detail. But it happened that a neighbor of ours, a young man, a Russian, young man whose name was Ivan Ivanovich, that means Ivan, the son of Ivan. And he also loved to draw, kind of in a very, well, self-taught way, you know. And he became acquainted with my father, and one day he asked him to pose for him. And he came and he drew my father. Made a bit large drawing. I still remember it. It looked like kind of a Russian icon. Had the quality of it. And to me it was a revelation, because I never saw anybody draw a living person, because children draw from imagination. And this is how I became very much interested in drawing from life. And I was so impressed by the drawing of Ivan Ivanovich's that for a while I didn't draw, and then I asked my father to pose for me like he did for this young man. And I made a drawing from life, the first drawing from life of my father, and the drawing was praised, and from that time on I drew from life. Didn't draw like a child anymore from imagination, which I think is unfortunate, because somehow I did not develop my imagination as even today, although I know how to draw, I know how to draw a human figure. I mean, I still rely a great deal upon life, upon working from life, from people.
When you came to this country, your family moved to the Bronx, where you stayed for about 5 years before you moved to Manhattan yourself. As you refer to it, it is your country, not only your city, it is your country, New York City.
Yes, New York City is where I lived from childhood, from 12 years on. I went to many other places, but I always returned to New York, because New York has the quality. I mean, New York and I kind of are a part of one another, I consider.
When first you came, you were not an artist except by night.
Except?
By night, when you attended art school.
Yes.
What were the circumstances of your early training?
I went to school for a while. I went to public school. I graduated public school. I went for about a year and a half to high school. And then, of course, we were a very large family, many children, 6 children, father and mother, also a grandmother. And sooner or later, I had to go to work. And I worked during the day, and I went to art school, to Cooper Union, my first art school. I went at night. And that's it.
What did you do during the day?
I worked. Jobs, all sorts of jobs. Later on, I worked in factories. I worked as a messenger boy. I worked as a newspaper seller. Yeah, all those things. All the jobs that one had in the before the 1920s, which were, the characteristic jobs, I mean, that many people of my generation had in those days.
You were a teacher for many generations as well, and your work is known.
Well, of course, later on I became a teacher. I mean, after, when I had my second one-man exhibition, I was invited to teach at the Art Students League, and I taught there for several years. In those days, they'd invite teachers to, they'd invite artists to teach at the league.
Who were your colleagues when you were there?
When I was there, my colleagues were Yasu Kuniyoshi, Alexander Brook. Let's see, I don't remember anymore. I mean, shortly before I came there, there was my teacher there, Guy Pen Dubois, there was Max Weber, and all the painters who taught there at that time had reputations, and that's why I consider it a great honor to be invited to teach at the Art Students League.
Are there any experiences you had while you were a teacher there that are particularly striking that you'd like to share with us, either among your students or with your colleagues?
No, nothing particularly. Some of the students I'm still in contact with. There were some very... In those days, the art schools were different from the art schools of today. Most of the students were very young people. I mean, they were so-called the professional art students, and they had hopes of becoming artists, full-fledged artists with reputations and so forth. Today's schools are different. I mean, of course, there are some young people there, but also a great number of middle-aged people and elderly people who have leisure now, and they come there for just to pass time and for therapeutic reasons, and also for enjoyment. I mean, but there are more elderly people today in art classes than there were when I was a teacher. There were young people. I remember when I was a student at the academy, there were no older people there at all. Everybody was young, and we were all kind of neurotic and had great hopes to become artists, and even thought in terms of immortality and so on.
Are you suggesting that current painting school classes or art schools are filled with...
That is that art schools have changed. I mean, they're not like they used to be. And we would choose our teachers because of their reputations. I liked a man like Guy Pen Dubois, and I became his student.
And that one would then choose an art school because they intended to make art their life and their livelihood.
That's right, absolutely, yes.
When did you decide to do that?
To make, well...
It certainly wasn't the usual way to earn a living.
Well, I didn't think in terms of earning a living, but I always thought or hoped to become an artist. I thought in terms of becoming an artist. This earning a living never bothered me till very much later. It was kind of a very romantic idea to become an artist for a long time in my childhood, in my youth. Only much later did I begin to think in terms of making a living.
Well, you were raised in an environment where that was a possible way of life. As you mentioned, your three brothers were all involved in art. And I guess we are most familiar with Moses and Isaac.
Yes.
Was having that kind of family environment a help or a hindrance to you? Did you help each other in your explorations in art? Was that a supportive experience?
Well, no, there was, first of all, my brother Moses is my twin brother, was my twin brother, and we always had a kind of a struggle for identity, each one wanted to be himself, and that was a big problem because we looked alike, and there was a family likeness in the work we did, and therefore we really had a struggle to become, each one to become himself. And from very early, Moses and I decided to go to different art schools, to have different studio, not to have a studio together, and we I think we succeeded in becoming each one himself. Excuse me, each one himself. As far as a hindrance or the opposite, well, there was, there was this struggle or this sibling rivalry always from childhood on. Each one wanted to be better than the other one, and that's a great, I should say, kind of torturous kind of feeling that never subsides. But we also profited by showing one another his work and criticize one another very severely sometimes, and we learned from one another a great deal.
Your work is known not only for the quality of the painting, but for its psychological acumen. What can you tell us about humanity after having observed it so closely for so long?
Well, I can't tell very much about humanity. I don't know, it's too much, too big a subject to talk to. But I attribute this psychological element, you said, in my work. I attribute it to the fact that I was actually, well, I have three cultures. I have the Russian culture, I have the Jewish culture, and I have the American culture. And these three cultures, I think, combined, creates this, especially the Russian.
Just one moment. Fire engines in the street. Perhaps you could talk a bit louder.
I'll begin it all over again.
Please. You were telling us that you have three cultures. I think it might help if we just...
This psychological, is that better? The psychological element that is in my work, I attribute to the three cultures that I have, the Russian, the Jewish, and the American. And especially the Russians are great psychologists. I mean, if you know their literature and their painting, they always looked deeply into the so-called the soul. I mean, if you know the Russian literature. And from childhood on, I read everything that my father had in his library. When we came to this country, actually, it's the Russian, we read an awful lot of Russian because Yiddish I learned here in this country. We studied some Hebrew when we were in Russia, but our mother tongue was Russian. And I read everything at the age, I came here at the age of 12, but till that age I've read everything that my father read. And it's, of course, it's Chekhov and Gorky and Dostoevsky and so on, Gogol. And they all were, I would call them psychological writers. I mean, they delved very deeply into the human psyche. And I think it's, and this thing of my insight into the human psyche is part of that environment, part of my childhood.
You have lived and worked in New York City.
I just want to say something else. Now, when I, very often, when I think of the American artists, like even Hopper or Sheeler, Charles Sheeler, George O'Keeffe, I call them the aristocrats of the so-called indigenous American art, the so-called aristocrats of the indigenous American art. When you see an exhibition of these men and others people like Niall Spencer and so on, there is a kind of a lack of humanism. There's a kind of a prophylactic quality about their work. I mean, their houses, their clean streets, their architectural things, and even Hopper, when he paints, there may be maybe one figure, maybe. It's like a desert. There are hardly any people there. Now, I'm a different kind of an artist. I paint people. To me, the people are the important subject of my art.
I can recall some of your early work where you were also that kind of a painter, where many street scenes were painted.
No, I painted street scenes, but there are always people there. There are always kind of, you know, I painted, for instance, some side streets of New York City, and where only the bums used to gather. And I painted them there, lying in the sun or in the shade, but they're always inhabited. My streets were always inhabited. I never painted just a street like, say, Charles Sheeler would paint. When he paints a factory, for instance, and I think they're very great artists. Now he paints a factory. He did paint factories. There's never a human being in the factory. He paints the outside of it or the machinery of it, but never the human being. And the same thing with the other artists. And they're always so clean and so meticulous, almost prophylactic. It's unlike the pictures I do. And I think this is the way I do add something to American art, my way, my addition.
You talk about their colors. Your palette, of course, is very distinctive. Those blues, those ever-present blues, a subtle palette that is often subdued and actually chromatically unified and very carefully controlled, whether it is that notion that you describe of...
Well, I have a very, very simple palette. I have very few colors on my palette. And some artists come to my studio and they look at my palette and they're amazed there's so few colors there, because too many different colors confuse me, and I am satisfied with just those few colors. I mix them and I do get the results I want. And once in a while I try some different pigment and it confuses me.
What are the colors that you
they're
use?
basic colors. They're yellow ochre, white, black, blue, burnt sienna, green. That's it. I use practically one yellow ochre. I don't use the other yellows, which is unusual. Also, I do have to get once in a while. I remember a time when I had to get cerulean blue, because I had to paint Isaac Bashevis' singer's eyes, and they're very, very blue. And that's, again, to go back to Isaac Bashevis' singer. To paint his eyes, I actually had to buy a tube of cerulean blue.
And he did a portrait of you, and I assume that is his only existing artwork.
Yes, he did the drawing of me.
In the 30s and 40s, you painted troubled times, uncertainties of the Depression and World War II, and in the 50s and 60s, you gave us life in the East Village, Vietnam protesters and flower children. Now, many of the people that you paint are dressed in blue jeans.
Yes.
Is it what they symbolize or the color that lures you?
Well, no, I always painted what I saw. In the Depression days, I saw people sitting in brown. They were kind of dressed very dingily, and the colors were dingy. And they were sitting in parks or lying down somewhere in parks, and I painted them. I always relied upon my eyes. Later on, I was on 2nd Avenue. That was in the 60s, I guess. And on 2nd Avenue, that was East Village at that time, and I got to know many young artists there and many young poets and writers, and I painted them. Now I'm on Columbus Avenue and uptown, and I see all these people dressed in jeans. I also, at the time they wore mini skirts. I painted them in mini skirts. I paint what I see. I paint what I see.
Many of the people you paint are personal friends or well-known personalities.
Yes,
how do you select your subjects, and what is the method by which you work?
Yes, well, I like to paint people. I like, again, coming back to this element of psychology of looking deeply into the human being. I like some of the people. I mean, I know people, I know many artists, and I paint them because I know them, and I love to paint them. And I paint my wife, my daughter, and my friends. But when I was young, I painted commissions. I did many portraits of men, women, and children especially, for money. In those days, if I'd get $25, $50, $75, $100, I'd paint these people for money. But I never enjoyed it. I never loved to do that because it always inhibited my style. It always made me, it curtailed me. I mean, I wasn't as free as I am when I paint people I know and they're not commissions. I paint to please myself. When I did those commissions, I had to please the mother of the child or the husband of the wife and so on.
Are the subjects often pleased no matter who paints them? Are subjects often pleased no matter who paints them?
Are they pleased? No, not. No, I don't think people who have their portraits painted, I mean, commission artists to paint their portraits, I don't believe they're always pleased by the art. As a matter of fact, just today I was reading about Kokoschka, you know, that famous painter, and he painted a wonderful portrait of an old scientist. I think his name was Forel. That man with the beard and his wonderful hands. And neither he nor the family liked the portrait. And it's one of the masterpieces of European art, of modern European art, if you know which one I mean. So that, no, commissions are not always accepted by those who commission the portraits.
Have you ever had that experience? Have a commission rejected?
No, I didn't. No, but I can tell very funny stories about some of those commissions. Shall I go into it?
Please.
It's just a little funny. Well, for instance, I painted a woman once, and she had the longish nose. And then she changed her nose, and she wanted me to repaint the portrait, something like that. Another man, I painted a man once in a while. No, I said I'm not a, what do you call it, a
plastic surgeon
or whatever.
Excuse me, sir.
And then it happened that I painted a middle-aged man. He just came from Florida, on vacation. No. When I painted him, he was kind of very haggard and very unhappy looking, or didn't feel well. And then he went to, I painted him, and it was accepted. And then when he came back from Florida, he was fat and brown. And he said, you know, Mr. Soyer, when the portrait you did of me is right above the sofa where I usually sit when guests come. And they always say, what's the matter with you, Charlie? Were you sick when you posed? And he came with the portrait and wanted me to repaint it, make him fat, as he said, kind of prosperous looking. I said, no.
When was your first exhibition in New York, and what were the circumstances that surrounded that?
Well, my first exhibition was in 1929, and I was friendly with my instructor at the Art Students League. And after I left the school, I still would come and see him and show him my work. And one day I brought him a painting, and he said, if you'll take this painting to the Daniel Galleries and tell them that I sent you there, and tell them that I sent you there. And I did that. I took that picture over to the Daniel Galleries, and they told me that if I'll have 12 such pictures, they'll give me a one-man show. And it took me a year to make 12 pictures like that, because at that time I still worked during the day, and I painted only weekends, and I had a one-man show. And the Daniel Galleries at that time was a very well-known gallery, and
who were the other artists that were exhibited in that gallery?
Kuniyoshi, Peter Bloom, what's his name? John Marin, and Niall Spencer, and also Paskin.
So it was quite an accomplishment for a
Yes,
very young man.
it was quite a big thing for me to be in that gallery.
And what happened to your career from that point on?
Well, from that point on, I considered myself an artist. And I began to get studios, first with some friends, and then my own studio.
You've had many studios around the city.
All over New York City.
First along the waterfront?
I love the waterfront, both east and west, before these highways were I watched building the east highway and also the west highway. And I painted some pictures of that, of the process of building some of those things. I don't know what those pictures are.
Where is your studio now, and how often do you go there?
My studio now is Columbus Avenue. It's off Columbus Avenue on 74th Street. It's 54 West 74.
In an office
and
building?
I go there every day.
In an office building, so to speak?
No, that was a building where many artists lived and worked at one time or another. It was a studio building, but now people live there, and they have converted the studios into homes. And some of them are very nice, very big, large rooms. And but I think I'm the only artist left there, about the only artist left there, who just uses it as a studio.
How often do you go?
How often? All the time. All the time. I go there, as my wife says. Some people ask her, does Mr. Soyer go to the studio every day? She says, yes, every day, including Christmas and Yom Kippur.
You have described yourself as a museum fiend, which is rather unusual for an artist, that you make museum pilgrimages all over the world. Can you describe some of them, and to the work of what artists do you most respond?
Well, again, those descriptions are in my book, but the artists I respond to are the great artists. I mean, the great classical artists, the great traditional painters. I mean, of course, you think of Rembrandt, you think of Courbet, of Degas, of the Flemish painters, Van der Weyden, Van Eyck. All these painters had the American painter Thomas Eakins. These are the painters that have influenced me in my work. I mean, they are my painters.
Is there the work of any artist that is always in your head when you yourself paint?
The work of any artist? Yes, there's always some artist in the back of my head when I paint. Yes.
Is there anyone specific?
Specifically, I think Degas, Thomas Eakins, Corot, Courbet. I mean, these are the people that are always in my mind when I approach a canvas. But of course,
is it form? Is it color? What is it about their work that so engages you?
The work is there. I think again the human quality in the work. Their interest in people. Their interest in human beings. That's the thing that always attracts me. You see, tremendous interest in the human face, or in the human body, a human gesture, in the human being in context, within the context of his life.
You have painted throughout the city for more than 60 years, as we've referred. What about the city continues to nourish you as an aesthetic environment?
Again, the people there, the people of the city, the people of New York. We just came back from Los Angeles, for instance. People don't walk there. You don't see people walking. They're always in cars. Here, this city teems with people. And then I watch those people. When I walk now along Columbus Avenue, I look at the men and the women there. I study their gestures. Every once in a while, an idea occurs to me, gee, I'm going to make a painting. I'll call it Columbus Avenue. Or when I walk on when I walked on 6th Avenue once, several years ago, an idea occurred to me. Now it's called Avenue of the Americas. That's a wonderful title for a painting. And I painted the picture, which I call Avenue of the Americas. But actually they're all the same. Columbus Avenue, Avenue of the Americas. They're people, and the facades of houses are secondary.
Do you ever paint out of doors?
I paint landscapes, yes. Landscapes out of doors.
Do you continue to do that?
I haven't done it for some time, but when we had, in Maine, I painted in Maine and Massachusetts quite a few landscapes, but I haven't shown them very much.
You made reference to the work of Charles Sheeler before and its rather antiseptic quality. Of course, Sheeler was a photographer as well. Do you ever employ the use of photography in any of your work?
No, never. I paint directly from life. I can't see those photorealists. I can't see them. I cannot see them.
When you say you cannot see them, what do you mean?
I don't appreciate them. I don't like them. I mean, I don't like their work. I don't know how they do it, even. I don't know.
Well,
it just does not interest me because the personality of the artist is not there. It's the camera. It's not even the human eye. It's the eye of the camera that does the work, most of the work.
There are several other schools of painting that do not interest you very much as well. In fact, that is a rather charitable way of putting it.
No, that's not what I just am not. I don't detest them. I don't decry them. But the fact is, they do not. It does not interest me.
I'm now referring to another school of painting, and that is, for so long, yourself and other distinguished social realist painters.
I wouldn't call myself a social realist. I mean, I am a representational painter. I paint representationally. I mean, realism again became kind of a word that they play with too much. But I represent things. I see something, and I represent it on the canvas.
Is that how you would describe your work?
I would describe myself a representational as against the non-representational painters.
Well, there was a period when you and other of your colleagues were almost invisible in terms of the critical community. And there was a point in the 1950s that you felt that art was not the preserve of a handful, and you called a meeting of a number of other artists. Can you tell us some of the circumstances of that meeting and that period?
Yes, well, that was during the ascent or the advent of the abstract expressionism, where there was something like a concerted effort on the part of the critics, museums, and the so-called cognoscenti to put it over. I mean, just to put it over. And they did a wonderful job. Overnight, they became all these people whom I knew. Actually, they were my contemporaries. All these people became geniuses overnight. And the other artists were kind of neglected. And you heard only about these abstract expressionists all the time, and there was tremendous kind of approval of them on the part of all these people. And but some other contemporaries of mine would meet me in the street and say, "What's happening to art? What's taking place now? Look at all these all these artists who became so famous, while we are kind of forgotten." Well, I said, it's not a question of just us. It's a question of art. What's happening to art? And let's discuss it. Let's talk about it. I mean, and I just sat down, wrote a couple of postcards to say to Edward Hopper, to Ben Shahn, to Yasuko Yoshi, to other artists of that type, and we began to gather.
Where did you first meet? Who attended? All the people that you invited?
We met some kind of restaurant on the west side, yes. And it was wonderful. I mean, we got to know one another. Henry Poole, Harper, I mean, they were all, Isabel Bishop, I mean, all these, some younger artists. They were younger then, like Jack Levine and many more whose
Many of
name
these
I
artists who you invited you did not know before you came to meet with them. Many of the artists did not know one another.
I knew them, some I knew, some I did not know too well, but we got acquainted, so to speak, with one another, and we discussed art. We were not bitter, we were not very critical of the, I mean, in a personal way, we were not critical of these people, like, Jackson Pollock or Rothko or all these people. But we try to understand what is happening to American art. And strangely enough, and then we began to publish a little magazine called Reality. And again, it was a kind of...
And what was the purpose of Reality, and for how long did it endure?
It was actually through our writing. I mean, the artists wrote. They decided to write.
And declared with a manifesto that many of them
we
signed.
had some kind of a manifesto that critics are not the only judges, or museums are not the only judges of art, that the artists themselves have an idea of what art is and so on. And we try to get together with the Museum of Modern Art and discuss the art situation or what's happening to art. It was all in a very civilized and intelligent way, but you'd be really, it's impossible to describe the exasperation on the part of critics, how angry they became, or also the museums. The museums actually sent. Yes, we were accused of being communists in those days. Those were McCarthy time. And sooner or later, no matter what you do, you'd be accused of. Who accused us of us? The editor of Art News. And not only that, I mean, many people. They accused Kuniyoshi, I mean, Edward Hopper, I mean, he was very kind of, I don't know what he was just, had great integrity, but I don't know what his politics were. Also Kuniyoshi and the others, I mean, but they accused us all, and they threatened us. They threatened us that they will
Who threatened you?
Again, the art magazines, and even the Museum of Modern Art. And some people who were very anxious to be members of this group, of the Reality group, seceded. They left the group because they got scared.
Well, how did the Museum of Modern Art threaten you? I mean, what could they have done, since they weren't doing anything for you?
Also, something, the element of communism went in. Not to somehow, not to get mixed up with with some kind of a movement.
And how did the group respond to that accusation?
Well, the group responded beautifully, except that I said some people got scared and left the group.
Who was that?
Should I mention names? I
Please.
can mention names. Well, Ben Shahn, who was one of the most eager people he wrote me a card. Oh, Raphael, sure, I'll come. It's about time that we should. And then the moment that we got this letter from the Museum of Modern Art, they sent it to me, by the way, with a messenger, threatening letter. Ben Shahn left it, and I got a telegram in the middle of the night from Abe Ratner that he doesn't want to have anything to do with it anymore since he heard from the Museum of Modern Art and so on.
Well, what was the nature of the threat from the Museum of the Modern Art?
As I said, there was no threat, don't you? The threat was that they will not be in the good graces of the Museum of Modern Art.
And they so
and
stated?
To be in good graces of modern art was very important to a man like Ben Shahn, very important to a man like Abe Ratner, and to some other people.
And it didn't matter to you?
Edward Hopper, it didn't matter. He was very
Maybe that's why he's at the Whitney
honest
now.
and very staunch, and he was what he was. It didn't matter to me.
Do you think your career has suffered as a result of that?
No, I don't think so. No, my art didn't suffer. Therefore, my career didn't suffer.
The very time of your first exhibition in 1929 was the year of the founding of the Museum of Modern Art.
Was that?
The year of the founding
Yes.
of the Museum of Modern Art. In its 50-year history, its focus has changed and evolved. And I wonder if you would comment, since you have been there from the beginning, as to the original focus, its genesis, and its evolution, and the current status of the Museum of Modern Art.
Well, I didn't follow it too well. I mean, I think all the museums have changed since I began to go to museums. You have no idea how the Metropolitan Museum changed.
Well, give us
how
some
the Whitney
idea.
Museum changed.
How have
when
they
I was at
changed?
the very first time I came to, I was taken there by a cousin of mine. I was about 14 years old. It was filled with Masonries, with Jeromes, with all sorts of that kind of painting. Well, and the American paintings were nothing but pictures of pretty women with flowers, or pretty women telling stories, reading fairy tales to their children. That's the kind of pictures were at the Metropolitan Museum in those days. But it has changed greatly. I think in my book I say that I developed together with the Metropolitan Museum. Because since I was 16 years old, I'd go to the Metropolitan Museum up till now. And I have changed, the museum has changed, and the Whitney Museum changed, and the Museum of Modern Art changed. All these museums put on wonderful exhibitions at one time or another. I mean, I've seen the first exhibitions of Sutin, Kokoschka in the Museum of Modern Art. I've learned a great deal. And Metropolitan Museum put on, I think, the very first Eakins exhibition I saw at the Metropolitan Museum. That was many, many years ago. And museums I learned a great deal in museums, and I am a museum fiend.
You mentioned that in the course of your career, you have changed as well. Is that your technique, your point of view, your state of mind? What has changed, and how has it changed?
No, I say that's, I said I hope it's changed. I say it in the context of what I'm saying in the book. Well, I saw an exhibition, say, in Vienna. It was called, I still remember the name, Polarität, or whatever it means. The exhibition was called Polarität, and it had paintings, beginning with Delacroix till, I think they had one American painting, it's by de Kooning. Well, oh no, that was in, was it in Holland? I don't remember now. Whatever, there was a painting, a couple of paintings by the abstract expressionists. No realistic American painting, no representational American painting. And I kind of, and I say there, when I see an exhibition like that, I question, where do I belong? My painting wasn't there, of course. Where do I belong in the field, in the world of art? My paintings are not seen in such exhibitions. They're not seen in the exhibitions in Rio de Janeiro or in Venice, Biennale.
Sao Paulo or Venice, the Biennale.
They're not seen in those empty, huge exhibitions. And I question, where do I belong? And I say there that I have changed. Certainly, my work is of today. My work is of today because I live today. I am a product of the aesthetics of today, of the life of today, and of the art of today, and so on. And I do hope that my work does reflect the spirit of today, as it should. That although I'm not an abstract expressionist, and I'm not all those. I don't belong to any of those isms. But nevertheless, I hope that my work does express the spirit of our time, And then I say that, and I hope that I am myself. I'm not influenced by all these isms, by all this abstraction. Not, let's see now, I can't recall it now. I
In
said
terms
it
of what
was my own choice, and I said
Did
to
you ever
myself.
experiment with that new wave of discovery?
I just want
Please.
to finish it, and when I said to be an artist of today, one has to be an abstract expressionist or a non-representationalist. Then I choose not to be an artist of today. And I quote Ang there, saying to his detractors, he said, they say I'm not of this century. They were accusing him that he was not of their century, of his century. He said, if I don't like my century art-wise, must I belong to my century? And I say that about myself. If that is the art of this century, I would rather not belong to my century. You see? And I paint the way I paint.
When abstract expressionism was a new wave of discovery, did it ever occur to you to experiment in that fashion, to work from your imagination?
A new wave of discovery?
At that point it was, surely. In the 1950s, did it ever occur to you to experiment with abstract expression?
No, it wasn't too much of a challenge for me. Because I know, as I said before, these abstract expressionists, I knew them all. They were my contemporaries. And I knew what they were before they became abstract expressionists.
What were they?
And what were they? They were kind of, not geniuses, to say to be polite, you know. They were kind of, some of them were a little mediocre. I knew them all. I liked them all as people. I knew especially Arshel Gorky, whom I liked very much. And I think that he was probably the most poetic of them. He had a certain beautiful quality in his earlier work, no matter whom he emulated. But there's always this element of Arshel Gorky in all his paintings. I always defended him. And I just deplore the fact that he finally became an abstract expressionist.
Are there more and more people that are accepting representational art today?
Well, I really don't know. I mean, I don't know. Are there? Maybe.
But that doesn't affect your work.
I think that some young artists became kind of sick and tired of what was going on, and they're trying very hard to get back to representationalism. But they have lost a lot of time, and it shows that it'll take a little while, that if it goes on, if that trend goes on, it'll take a little while for them for the art to redevelop again. I have my, but that's too much to go into.
Do you think that profound, thematic, contemplative painting is something that is becoming extinct?
What do you say?
That profound, contemplative painting is something that is becoming extinct?
It shouldn't. I don't know. Well, profound. Well, it's too much of a question. I think what is really the problem is that to really try to understand what's taking place in art today is that what the artist used to do, what was expected of the artist to do, is done technologically today. At one time, a person went to Van Eyck or Van Dyck and said, do my portrait. Now they can go to the photographer. When the inauguration of Napoleon took place, David painted this great painting in the Louvre. Today, inauguration of a president takes place. There is the cameras, there is television, there is everything else, but not the artist. When the war in Vietnam took place, at one time, artists would go and make drawings like Winslow Homer during the Civil War and so on. Today, there's nobody but the photographer. In other words, the artist, our society, technological society, can do without an artist. An artist is not needed in our society. And therefore, I think the artist lost his function, and he doesn't know what to do with himself.
Is there anything that you haven't painted that you would like to?
Well, I would like to paint the Supreme Court.
The justices of the Supreme Court?
Yes, like Franz Hals painted those huge paintings. Why not? Would be wonderful.
But actually, what you just said is
But
what
it's
is happening in the State Department. There are no longer portraits that are commissioned, but
No.
major, and then the Defense Department as well, but major photographic studies.
Exactly. It's our society can do without artists.
Among your works, who was your favorite subject? Your wife excluded, of course.
My work? Well, I don't know. I still like some of my early paintings that I did in the Depression days. And I like some of the paintings I did recently. I like the paintings I'm doing today, sometimes. Not always.
How do you know when a painting is finished?
I really don't know. That's a problem, you know. At times I overdo a painting. I work too much on a painting, and I lose the initial quality, the initial quality of promise, of spontaneity.
I noticed that you are wearing a decoration, one that was recently given to you.
Not recently. I've had it a long time.
That is
years.
not the national.
I'm a member of the Institute of Arts and Letters, of the Institute and the Academy of Arts and Letters. That's the institute or the academy where
Barbara Tuchman
writers
is the president.
and painters belong. And
Actually, I was thinking of your recent honor for
that
the
was,
National Arts Club.
I got some kind of a gold medal, yes.
In fact, the number of people that were present reveal the wide range of your friendships, and some of them appear in your canvases. And you may be conservative in your choice of painters by contemporary standards, but surely you are not in your choice of writers. Why do you not apply the same standards to experimental writers as you do to experimental painters?
Well, I think writers make more sense than the experimental writers make more sense than the experimental painters. Because, I don't know, I haven't seen just a blank page and say this is a piece of literature, but I saw a blank canvas and say this is a work of art.
Did you ever expect your life and your work to unfold the way it has?
Did I expect? Yes, I had the vague kind of perceptions or vague hopes, I don't know just what. I always wanted to be an artist.
You work from early in the morning till dusk on a daily
Not terribly
basis.
early. I'm there about 9:30 and I work till about 5 o'clock. But a lot of time is taken by washing brushes, cleaning the palette.
And you stretch your own canvases.
Not always, no. I just restretched the big canvas because I had to restretch it.
What can we expect from you in the future?
The same thing.
More of the same? Well, we all look forward to that with considerable interest and delight. And thank you very much for being with us, Raphael Soyer. And thank you, audience, too. You see, you are Russian. You are Russian applauding. In return, you applaud the audience.
Well, that's a nice thing to do,
Yes.
actually.
And now it is time for the class to join in the conversation. If you have a question, won't you please raise your hand? And if you care to, identify yourself by name as well. The man in the center.
What do you